or internet stuff, YouTube ads, and so we're bombarded by that, and it's just it's preying on the desires of our heart. And so whether it's us as parents and leaders and teachers and churches, people that are shepherding kids, all of us have those things coming at us. And so and the thing is, even if we were in a poorer culture, we would still deal with it. So I don't want to say, it's harder in America or worse in America, but that's where we're at. So and we do have people outside America that listen to this, and so I'd imagine probably more of them are in developed countries and not developing, but yeah, it's a significant issue. So do you think? I mean, kind of along those lines, do you think that our Western affluence helps or hurts us toward generosity? I know I think it was John McEnroe, the great tennis player, was once asked about his kids, and he said, basically they lacked motivation to excel or push hard because they had affluenza. He had done well financially, and so it's like, well, we're provided for, and so it kind of cuts some of the ambition. But do you think our affluenza here in the West helps us or hurts us towards generosity?
Yeah. So my answer to that honestly is yes and no, and maybe that's not the most helpful answer. So when thinking, on a broad
like a
level,
politician, man.
Statistical scale, I mean, we are, just factually speaking, the United States of America is the most generous country in the world, and they have been for a long, long time. It's been a tradition. As much as it's declining, almost every statistic shows that the two most generous countries in the world are some small country in Western Asia. I don't remember exactly which one it was that's randomly up there, but then the United States is always up there. And it's not just the amount of money given, it's percentage of income given, it's amount of volunteer hours given. It's just a global recognized fact that the United States is a very generous country compared to the rest of the world. Maybe not as generous as it should be, maybe not as generous as it was in the past, but compared to the rest of countries, like it or not, it's just kind of true. And I think there's great generosity throughout the world, though. I don't think this is a result of our affluence. I think maybe it's a result of some Christian influence, even if we're not a Christian country. And even when we think of this, it's funny because we do portray the negativity of the Western world and our affluence. Some of the East Asian countries are ranked among dead last. China is actually dead last in generosity. Generosity is a far less heard of thing in places like China in the Eastern world. But the wealthy, that being said, the wealthy, like John McEnroe, like that example, the wealthy in our country often give far less sacrificially. So Bill Gates might start charities and things like that. But a lot of statistical measurements of giving in a way that kind of costs you, we see that far more in America among the poorer subgroups within America than within the very, very rich.
I've seen some similar measurements like that. And now, I can't give away someone else's money. But there are some notable exceptions. Someone like Truett Cathy, who gave away 90% of his income. And I think was it R.G. Letourneau? Can't remember his initials. But yes, he I think did something similar.
Gave to every Christian college that's ever existed.
And the thing is, the Lord doesn't require that, I don't think. And so in some ways, it's easier for a poor person to give more sacrificially than it is for a rich person. But again, you can't give away someone else's money, though some try. But yeah, I think that my take on it, as for what it's worth, is similar to yours. That it is sort of a yes and no. Our generosity tends to be hurt and infected because of sin, but at the same time, it does open up the possibility for more generosity. And yeah, I was looking up what you're talking about, and it says, Burma or Myanmar is the most generous country per capita, and then the United States. And so that is interesting.
Yeah.
But
how
would you say? Yeah, it's not a real big country. This is where what's his name, Judson went.
Yeah, and like all the other countries around it are among the dead last, by the way.
Really, that's even more fascinating. So how would you say generosity is a theological issue?
Yeah, I think it's a theological issue because all of our possessions and time are really God's rather than things that we've earned or things that we're entitled to. And I think that hugely shapes how we understand how we give our money, how we use our money. I think also when we are eschatological, when we think of eschatology and God's future for this world, we see giving as an investment rather than as something that we're really even sacrificing, that we're losing out on. Seeing that new kingdom mentality and understanding how the Bible teaches theologically that we invest into eternity by what we give today and get eternal rewards based upon our faithfulness in this life, I think changes our view of giving. But also in a really broader level of connection to the gospel, we see what God gave. And that's a theological point of God's giving his own very own son for us. Jesus giving himself the greatest possible gift. And how dare we hoard what we have when God has given us everything, even the life, even the breath within our lungs.
That's a really good take on that. I mean, God is a generous God. He made us in his image. And then for his people, he's recreating us to become like him. And so it is very much a becoming what we are to be, what God designed us to be. And Jesus himself talks a lot about possessions. I mean, he talks about heaven and hell more than anyone else in the Bible. And he talks about money and possessions more than he talks about heaven and hell. I think it's an indicator of where our heart is. And so I think that's a key way that we are to be generous. It's not just with our money and possessions, but that is a key way. So how can we fight against selfishness and consumption in our families, especially as we see what we've come to know as Christmas here in the West approaches and the engulfing greed that comes with it? How can we work against that?
Yeah, I think I think participate in an offering together as a family. So one thing I'm really glad that our church is bringing back was that at our church for a while we kind of had the offering in a big wooden thing in the back of the church, and people would just put their money in on their way out the door. And I understand that, and a lot of people give online, and I think that's perfectly fine. But now we've decided to kind of bring back passing the plate, and I think there's a beauty in that because it's an act of worship, and we see us give together and us worship together in our giving, not paying attention to how much somebody else is giving, but seeing that our giving is connected to our worship to God rather than just something that we have to do to financially support our worship of God, which is still true. But also, I think having families doing it together, have kids participate in the offering. I love when you see a parent have a child give their quarter from their allowance, in the offering. I think there's a beauty in that. I also think we help fight against this together as families by encouraging families to serve together. And I think there are some great examples I've seen in our church of families really serving the Lord in the church and in society in general together. I think even one of my greatest bonding times I remember with my dad towards the end of high school. Actually, it was on a college break during a winter break in college. We went out and we helped with a large farm that was burnt down, and we helped kind of clear up some of the rubble and stuff like that and debris, and I think it was a really bonding, important time for us. One thing that we did at my previous church and we're going to do at Faith Family is something called Family Service Saturday, where we come together and we help those who are in need by providing some shoe boxes with some toys and stuff like that for those who wouldn't get Easter stuff. It's not a Christmas thing as much. Those who wouldn't get Easter gifts.
Okay, that's neat. Yeah, I think those are some great, very practical ideas. I think another thing, to not always make the biggest gift that you give to be within your family. And to let your kids know that, even especially as they get older and they can really appreciate the value of a dollar, and tell them, and I'm not saying that necessarily you do that every year, but at Christmas time, maybe you're going to give to missions or some family in need or something like that. I think it would send a statement to them, especially when they can appreciate the significance of that. But I really like the serving together, being generous with your time, and then something that we're trying to do more of as a family. We had done it in the past, and then we got through just the season with kids and things. It was challenging, and so we just didn't push maybe as hard as we should have at times. But to show hospitality as a family, so not just entertain people at Christmas time and have some nice party, but just to show hospitality, to invite people into our life, and so. Well, what do you think about asking for or encouraging or allowing, however you want to parse that, the Christmas wish list? And sometimes you could read that as a demand list. Do you think is that a helpful thing? Do you think it's hurtful, or you just think it's kind of neutral?
I think lists like this, I think it can help the gift giver be generous in some ways. I think I'm not very good at reading people and guessing what people want. And when people give me a gift list, I feel like I can find the best things that would really serve them and that they would enjoy. But that being said, I do see your point. It can, I think, really create a consumeristic entitlement. But what do you think about that? It sounds like you have more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be similar to yours. I think it can be helpful if someone overtly says, "Hey, I want to get you something that you like. Can you give me some guidance on that? There's something that you need." But it can also lend itself towards just this expectation, like I want, and none of us really need to be. We don't need help to covet, And so I know Tiffany, my wife, used to work with people that they were talking about, my kid, they put on their list, and it was all these like super expensive electronic items, and they felt this obligation, like they had to get them because they were on the list. I'm like, that's like Xbox One or whatever it was at the time, and this phone, and I mean, we're talking like serious cash for these things, and it's like, just say, well, no. I mean, I just didn't. We had kids at the time, just very young. So to me, it seemed easy just to say, well, no, you're not going to get that. But I think some of these kids were older. But even, when I was growing up, I didn't assume that I was going to get everything that I wanted. And it was just, I don't know, personal issues. But I felt weird asking for things. Now my parents would, beg me to tell me something that you want so we don't get you underwear and pencils. And they still tell me that, today, but it wasn't all just, righteousness and like, oh no. But anyway, I think, it can be, in some ways it can be neutral, but, sin gets in there and messes everything up. So
it does.
So how do you think that churches can encourage generosity among different generations in the church, grandparents, parents, just kind of different groups?
So with grandparents, I think you can teach them to give and also serve even kids or youth. I think there are some times in which the generation of grandparents in churches or in families can reach a point where they feel, I've done my time, I've served, and I've gotten my service to the Lord in. And I don't think that's a very generous or Christ-like attitude. And there are those that very much fight against that mentality. But I think all grandparents, all older generations, should seek to be a model, I think, even to younger generations, of serving sacrificially. For parents, I think one important way we can do that is teach about idolatry of kids from the pulpit. And how we so many times, especially around Christmas time, we idolize our kids. That's why we give the most expensive gifts sometimes to our kids, but don't give it all to missions and stuff like that. and I think even teach about how giving away as a family actually helps our kids, and it teaches our kids something important, more important than having the nicest Xbox would. And then for youth,
I love that.
I think Paul's teachings of the benefit of